Hi.
Hi, my name is Isabella Ost, and I decided to research the armored catfish as my invasive species. So, the armored catfish is originally from tropical South America in places like Panama and Costa Rica. But now they can be found in Florida, Texas, and Mexico, also other tropical climates. They're part of kingdom Animalia and phylum Chordata. They are algae feeders and scavengers on the bottom of their water habitats. So, how did the armored catfish relocate? Well, they can become in accidental and intentional ways. So, accidentally, it's called the aquarium trade. People with these aquariums who decided they didn't want them anymore would go to like oceans and streams and dump these tanks in them, and they would swim out into different streams and multiply essentially. Intentionally, water resource managers would take these species and put them in streams and oceans for algae and plant control, and then they can be found in ponds, lakes, canals, and slow streams. Some major impacts of the armored catfish. One of the main ones has to do with the vermiculated suckermouth sailfin catfish with the Florida manatee disturbances. So these Florida manatees during winter months, they need to conserve their energy and they can't be moving around a lot, right? But these catfish see this to their advantage and they go running up to them and attach so they can clean off all the algae and get their food. Well, this of course disturbs the manatees and they're flipping their tails trying to get them off, exerting energy which is only harming them in the long run. And they're forced to have to flee and then they're dying quicker, they're getting sicknesses, and the catfish obviously don't care. Another one is disruption to shorelines. These catfish like to burrow. They burrow up to 3 feet deep, which obviously causes erosion, and it's impacting not only just inside the water but outside as well with fertile soil. They can additionally leave the water essentially, breathe air. Some species can even walk on land, which is crazy because they can relocate to so many places even more. With competition, they're driving out the native species, so there's less competition they have to deal with, and they're multiplying and essentially taking over these environments. And they're adding stress to the natives, so they have to flee and leave. The armored catfish are bottom dwelling and they are invasive in a variety of aspects. Like I said, with the erosion, it also encourages algae growth, which is kind of a domino effect because they feed on algae, so it's just a breeding ground for these armored catfish. They deplete the basal resources for the fauna, which are natives, and this is essential for their survival. They can also tolerate the degraded water conditions, so that means the natives are having to leave because these catfish are taking over, and the oxygen level is going down and down and down, and these are just only contributing to it, making it go even worse. They can walk on land and breathe air, like I said, which just contributes to their invasive. They tolerate hypoxia so much better than the natives, like we talked about in the last slide. So they're forced to change. They have to relocate, which is actually protecting the armored catfish because less predators are out to get them. Their feeding times have to change. They're having to go out earlier in the day rather than at night because this is when the oxygen is lower, which means the armored catfish are going to be out. The armored catfish end up creating safe zones in hypoxic areas. They're out at night because obviously the oxygen levels are lower. They're reshaping the floor, causing all this dirt and erosion and sediment to come up. They gather in large groups. They go up together for air. They go out to feed. They're coming in huge, massive groups. And they're most active at night when it's hypoxic. Some eradication controls. One main example is the Rainbow River in Florida. So a group of fishermen went out to try to eliminate the species in the Rainbow River, and they took some by hand and by spear and removed 28 between the years of 2006 and 2008. And once the 28 were removed, they didn't come back again. However, they tried it in other springs and streams, which they removed thousands of them. However, they kept coming back because of how common they were. And the only reason they were able to remove them in the Rainbow River is because it was a more controlled environment. They were less in a pack and the water was clearer and cooler. Another example is a chemical called rotenone, which kills fish. So yes, it does kill the armored catfish, but it also kills off all other fish in the area.